So by now you probably have heard of the revolution that is taking place in Iran and the protests in support of it all around the world. Just yesterday we had protests in 158 cities all around the world where we demanded freedom for Iran. So I just wanted to talk about a few things that I think are not really clarify for especially Western audiences because there are so many nuances when it comes to Iran and if they are skipped over and overlooked, people tend to sort of go for the narrative that more does more harm than good for the Iranian people and sort of like minimizes the situation in Iran. So first of all, although this revolution began by the murdering of a woman, a Kurdish woman, and has at its core the chant woman life freedom, but it is not a women's rights limited revolution. It's not that we want the legislation to change. Also, even that is impossible. Like being anti-woman is at the core of this regime, so they would never change anything to improve the lives of women in Iran. But even if they were to do that, that's not what we want. That's not our demand. Our demand is not for the government to remove the morality police. Our demand isn't for the government to sort of improve women's rights. None of that is being asked by Iranian people or fought for. That people are not being killed for that. So although it is very much a woman-led, woman-centered revolution, that because of women it has gathered a lot of attention, but that's not the objective really. Like women are not the only case for this revolution. So our legislation is against queer people, against human rights like overall really, because we have execution, we have unfair prison treatment, all things that really have been affecting our livelihood. It's just wrong. Everything in Iran is wrong. The environment, everything is suffering at the hand of this regime. They imprison and even kill then environmental activists. So we want the whole government to be gone, because until they are in power, we are going to be killed one by one, and that's like a major slogan as well on the streets of Iran right now. So there's that. And then with regards to like political mindset, although we have like different viewpoints in Iran from like far right to far left, but the overwhelming majority, especially in Gen Z, do not care for either side. Like no one is really like very heavily focused on like this political agenda of, oh, I want like this Marxist ideology, or I want this like, I don't know, whatever far right mindset to go on. That's not the case really. Like there are people who represent that, but that's not the representative of the majority of the population, truly, if you want to be honest, because under a fundamentalist dictatorship, people have suffered the consequences of ideological governance, and they just don't want ideology to rule over them. They want a mixture of things. They want like sort of like a harmonious government where we have freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and at the same time we are not so rigid in our way of working that we stop progress, we stop moving forward, that we are stuck at like a certain point in a certain lifestyle. We don't want that. So people are very much for like a fluidity within the government, where we see what works and what doesn't, what applies to Iran and what doesn't. We don't want to like go with this canon mindset where, oh, like this book says this, we are going to apply it. That's not really something that people want, because Iran has a very unique geographical and political and environmental, just everything about Iran is very unique, at social, economic, everything. And especially we are at a destruction point. Like we basically are starting from zero with this country, and actually minus zero, because everything has been destroyed. So that's something to be mindful of, that we don't want to apply whatever Western mindset or Eastern mindset. We don't want these binaries to be working in the country. We want a thing that works for Iran and for different parts of Iran. So that's also something to be mindful of. It's important that whatever ideology you support or adhere to, you do not try to fit our revolution into that, or yourself into our revolution, and support this as a progressive liberatory movement, even if not everything that we are demanding for is according to your ideas. Because that's called hijacking. If you just like highlight a few things that you agree with and ignore the rest of it, it's just hijacking a movement, and that's not okay really. So there are people who are the majority of people are protesting for all human rights, because the Islamic Republic is against all of them. Like we have executions, we have unjust prison time, we have basically persecution of LGBTQ people, we have discrimination in terms of services and resources provided to people in different parts of the country. So the closer they are to the borders, the worse the conditions tend to be, and the more separation they suffer from if they are dissenting or protesting. Just like it happened in Zahedan in Sistan, Balochistan, that many people were killed, reportedly 200 people, but we don't know the exact numbers yet, just a few days ago. So it's basically for all of these people. So we don't go about things with this this group is being discriminated against, this group is being this group is being that, because our entire country, not even just our nation, but also Afghanistani refugees, anyone really that is in Iran is suffering under this regime. So we just want this country to be liberated, so that not only our people are liberated, but also the people in Syria, in Iraq, even in Afghanistan, in Yemen, all of these people who have been suffering from the military involvement of our state in their countries, and we haven't been able to do anything about it. We want all of them to be free. People in Lebanon, even like in Israel and Palestine. So we just don't want our country to be militarily involved in any part of the world. We don't want this message of Shiaism to be spread anywhere. We don't want our state to be a religious fundamentalist state. We don't want any of this. So that's basically sort of the foundation of this movement, that we don't want to be ruled by these clerics that have no humanity. Another thing is that there is a lot of talk about how like we are not anti-Islam, but we are like anti like Islamic governance. That is true to a certain point. Like we obviously do not want religious governance anymore. We have suffered the worst consequences under it, so we definitely don't want that. But at the same time, the society under religious teaching and religious education has been impacted quite negatively. Homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, a lot of things, patriarchy, a lot of things are just deeply rooted within our mindsets by this education system. So we are very much for privatization of religion, where it's not really like prevalent in the public spaces, because it has been affecting us very negatively, and we need time to heal from that, and we need time to undo the harm. So this is a secular movement, and most likely it's going to be it's going to be up for election and things like that, so I can't say for sure what's the outcome going to be, and the majority are still very much a Muslim majority. But I think for many people it is true that we want religion to stay at homes, and we don't want it to be in any way publicized. So that's something to be mindful of, that we have been victims of this religion, and that this is not like indigenous to us. Like this religion is not indigenous to Iran, and it has been brought with violence and with death and murder and rape and for centuries, and this regime just like made it much worse than all the times before. So we just want time away from it, and we want the entire population, especially our younger generations, to breathe and be able to live their own lives without the fear of hell or heaven. So that's a very, very important thing for us, especially the younger generations. There might be a little bit of a confusion for people, for example, in the West, if you see our stuff being covered by Fox News, which is not known to be like a progressive channel, and then you see this being a woman-led, woman-centered revolution. It might be confusing, or like how are they supportive of women now? So that's because of politics. So in terms of political agendas, the Biden and Democratic administrations overall have been very much like appeasing. The Trump administration wasn't that way really, and that is not because like they champion something. It's not because they champion human rights and the other one doesn't. It's just because they see their benefits in this certain framework. So a lot of Iranians actually preferred Trump because of his treatment of the regime in Iran, rather than the Biden administration, that has been very much like slow and useless really when it comes to supporting Iranian people. So the assassination of Soleimani was something that people in Iran celebrated because he was a murderer of Iranian people. There are things to be mindful of. So the fact that right-wing individuals might be supporting this is very much about politics, and if you are against that, or if you don't approve of the fact that we are being represented by that, well, you see the message, you see that it's about freedom and it's about human rights, so you can very much urge your politicians, your media outlets, your influencers, your celebrities, whoever you approve of, to speak on this. Especially like I see BIPOC and queer communities really vastly being silent about the situation in Iran, while it's a very important cause, I think, for everyone. Like after the revolution, everything in the world will be different. So you can really urge the people you approve of to speak of this. Iranian people are being killed on the streets of Iran, so we don't have time or energy or resources, and we cannot afford to now like go pick and choose between who we want to represent us. We really can use all the support that we can get, and we are not going to like play by any rules and just like shut this down or shut that person down and be like, no, you don't speak of this. We can only shut the people down that we think are continuing to spread propaganda in favor of the government. For example, like Al Jazeera English has been like a major propagandist, or New York Times. But we can't just go around, if like they are saying the things that we are saying, if they are amplifying our voice, whatever their objective and agenda is, we can't afford to just like fight with everyone until like these few people that's the world approves of talks about us. So if you want these few certain individuals or organizations or whatever to talk about this and for our voices to be amplified by them, you can help by reaching out to them and urging them to speak and take a stand and stop being so silent and complicit. I think for us, like, the fight is with our government, and we are going to use all the tools against this government. And for it to be politically correct or sort of accepted within the Western popular and political culture, that's another case. And people who are not very much involved in the conflict or like are not in Iran, they can really help amplify our voices in different platforms and by different types of like more progressive representatives of like social justice activists, feminists, queer activists, whoever it is. But just know that if we are letting whoever represent us, it's because we need representation no matter what, and we're going to take whatever support that we can get, and it doesn't matter for us who it is. And lastly, I think it's important for Muslims to take a stand and also to take a step back, because we have really suffered at the Islamic ideology. Whether or not you approve of this type of Islamic governance, it is something that we have a lot of trauma from, and we are healing. We're not even healing yet, but we want to be healing from. So really stop equating what's happening in Iran or what happened to Mahsa Amini to, I don't know, the Quebec proposed ban on hijab or the burqa or the French ban on hijab. None of this is similar to what we are experiencing. None of you are being killed for any of these bans. So it's very different, and it's also hypocritical to talk about it in this way, because we all know, we who have been brought up with Islam and in Muslim families, we know that for all the talk about freedom of choice and how like some women are choosing things, there's a lot of shame. Even if you're not in an Islamic country, there's a lot of shame involved with not wearing the hijab, a lot of force involved, a lot of threats involved in it. So it's not really that all the women who are wearing the hijab outside of Islamic states are choosing it. Families are still very much a source of control and power over the bodies of women. So a lot of women actually, a lot of young women are getting married at the age of just 18 so that they can unveil, because the younger generation is more progressive and their husbands are more progressive than their fathers. So these are things that we know and we have lived with, and you can't fool us. So for those of you who are really choosing this, even if you're really choosing this, it's better to really address these realities that still for a good majority, I can say, this is not a choice. Hijab is not a choice, and you cannot erase those women even in Western countries who are being forced into the hijab. And you cannot make it appear as if what happens to those who are being forced to wear it and those who are being forced to not wear it is the same, because we still have honor killings even in Canada. And this is a reality, and you can't just pretend that it's not and shut it down under the name of racism and Islamophobia, because women are suffering at the hands of this ideology, and it needs to really stop and be addressed.